Greetings in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I am Andrew Crawley. Listen, go ahead on, visit my website, purchase my book, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yeah, listen, guys, today, for a brief moment, I just wanted to get on to, for those of y'all who may have or haven't heard yet, Fred Hammond recently came out with a video response to, Marvin Winans and what he said about everybody who's a part of Greek fraternities and sororities, the D9, in which Fred Hammond himself is a part of. And so it's no surprise that Fred Hammond would defend it because guess what? He is a part of one. And before I go on any further, I do want to make this mention. One of the keys and wisdom to life when it comes to handling or at least understanding people is you will understand their logic. You will understand their mindset if you first can determine their heart issue behind any given matter. And so it is with what we are going to be discussing briefly here today. It is with, Fred Hammond. It comes as no surprise that he is trying to defend the fact that he's a part of a Greek fraternity. And so, he is given a response, like I said, to Marvin Winan. But in life, regardless of whether it's this subject or anything, please understand, if you could discern a person's heart issue given any matter, you can determine and easily understand why they do what they do and say what they say and defend what they want to defend. And in this case, we do know that Fred Hammond, of course, would defend D9, Greek letters, Greek organizations. Why? Simply because he's in one. Think about it, y'all. No matter how many people claim Jesus Christ that are in these organizations, you won't find one person that are currently embracing these organizations that are a part of them that will say what needs to be said about them simply because they're in them. Make sense? So, of course, Fred Hammond and the like will defend them because that's their heart issue. They're in it, so they have to defend it. They're not going to see God's view on it. And sadly, a lot of these people you can't even reason with because their heart and mind is already made up. So I want to let you know, this video probably ain't for Brother Fred because he probably will never see this video. But it's for everyone who witnessed his defense. And the reason why I bring this up, because it's just not about this situation, but the reason why I just was so determined to make a video about it is because the same mistake that he used in defending it, this flaw, everybody used it. You have used it in one form or fashion in your lifetime if you still don't use this formula or this flaw. And it's so flawed, it is so negative in the eyes of God, and it really doesn't make sense when you really break it down. But hey, this is something that most people have used and will use from time to time. So I want to break down and I want to expose this flaw of a logic to let you know that no case can be made with this type of logic, okay? So I'm not going to play the video or anything today, but I am just going to briefly tell you, you can go see it for yourself. But a part of the video, he came to a section where he was trying to defend it, and one of his defense mechanisms for being okay with still being a part of the organization that he's in, is he said, you know what? If you say the days of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he was trying to make a case for if you use those words, if you say and recognize those days as days of the week, that you don't even realize that you are mentioning Greek gods, because it is a known fact that all of our days of the week are named after Greek gods. You see what I'm saying? And so I get it. That is a fact. But what Brother Fred was trying to do with that fact is try to present something that was totally not true. And if you just go back and look at it, he just thought he just made a great case. And I'm looking back and I'm like, is this what we doing now? I'm like, Fred Hammond and the like, is that your final answer? You're going to try to make a point that it's okay for you to pledge allegiance to align yourself with a spiritual organization. And might I add, if you ask anybody that's a part of them, either they are naive or they're lying when they say it is nothing spiritual about all of those. Matter of fact, take the time and go on my YouTube channel. I actually broke down the Omega Psi Phi in a brief video. So go back there and check that out. And I just simply listed some facts that they would agree with because it's in their material. I just brought it out to the forefront and I just presented truth about that. So go and check out that video. It's on my YouTube channel right now. But Fred Hammond just thought he just brought the house down with that point. And it couldn't be further from the truth, because you mean to tell me that it's okay that because people say the days of the week that its origin was named after Greek gods, that because they do that, it's all right and people need to back up and have hands off saying that you don't need to be a part of Greek organizations and fraternities. You see how silly that sounds? If that ain't reaching, I don't know what is. Because see, just at the mentioning of the name of a Greek god, is definitely don't equate and is no ways near the same as you pledging allegiance to one in the organization. As you saying, I'm going to lockstep in arms. This is going to be part of a family that I'm going to pledge to, that I'm going to connect my life with. We're not connecting our life with and worshiping a Greek deity just because we mentioned the name of a day that was named after a Greek deity. Come on. That's just like saying we worship the all-seeing eye because it's on the pyramid on the dollars that we spend. Come on, guys. But you know what? All in the name of cognitive dissonance and having a heart issue behind something, it makes us attempt to do foolish reaches like this one that Fred did. But you know what? That ain't really what I'm here today. That's the reason why I'm here. But what I want to debunk, what I want to dispel is this notion that most people don't even realize that he used too, and it is so flawed. It is so out of touch. It should never be used because it is pointless when trying to use it to prove a point. And that is this. Let's just say that we're going to give Fred that point. And I don't, for the record. Let me say this again so people won't put words in my mouth who see this video later on. I am not agreeing with his point. It was not a great point. I'm just saying, for the sake of example, let's just say we're going to give Fred that. Let's just say he is right in the point that he was trying to bring up in saying that we are wrong for calling the days or mentioning the days of the week because they're after Greek gods. Let's just give them that. Again, I don't agree with, but for the sake of where I'm going next, I want to say, to get past that, let's just say, okay, we'll give you that, Fred. Here's what still doesn't make sense. Whenever you or Fred Hammond or your mother or father or your pastor or your friends or your relatives try to point out inconsistencies in others to prove that they're okay in whatever they're wrong in, is just plain wrong and should never be used to prove a point. You can't prove a point with a double negative. We've all heard the phrase before, two wrongs don't make a right. So let's just say if we're wrong for saying Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, if we're wrong for that, that still doesn't purify Fred's wrong of being in the organization. So what we should be saying is, if you can point out my wrong, that doesn't mean that you're right to now embrace your wrong. That just simply means that whatever you can point out that's wrong about me, I need to have a heart of contrition about. And so do you. So this whole thing, but I see this happening all the time. People, when they don't like something that's called out in their life, or they don't like being corrected in a certain area, they be like, well, you do the same thing in other areas. Even if they did, that doesn't matter when it comes to you supposed to correct your wrong. Because guess what? Nothing get past God. God is going to judge us all on whatever wrongs we do have. So why would we ever think it makes sense to use a double negative to prove a point? It doesn't, and it never have. So just because you can prove the hypocrisy of someone else doesn't mean that what you are doing is now okay to continue to be embraced. I hope we take this flaw once and for all and stop using it. I've heard my family members use it. I used to do the same thing when I was wrong. I hear people say, well, you can't correct your kids because you used to do the same thing when you were that age. That's dumb when you really think about it, because as you as a parent don't want your kids to make the same mistakes that you made. So this is why you correct them in the things that you've done wrong. Because guess what? One of the things is true that's different about you now correcting your children and your followers versus you back then when you was making a mistake that you're telling them not to make. The thing that is the biggest difference is that it was evident that God gave you grace enough, time enough to correct it and get it right. But because none of us is guaranteed tomorrow, the next day, or even the next second, we can't be guaranteed that God is going to give us and grant us grace and time to get it right. This is why we need to do it now instead of thinking that God owes us grace to get it right later on. Because he holds time in his hand. He knows our expiration date. We don't. So we always need to have an immediate heart of contrition when it can be determined that we are in the wrong. But pride will say, don't call out my wrong if you do the same thing in another area. Because guess what? Even if that's true, God is going to see them about whatever the wrong they're doing, but that don't mean God is going to not see you and what you're embracing. So lastly, let's talk about the feelings of the one who should be the most important, that most of the time, most of us never consider his feelings, and that is Jesus Christ. That is God himself. So here's what really wouldn't make sense if we consider how he feels about not only this matter, but any matter where we want to try to have pride to make us stick our chest up and point out a hypocrisy that someone is doing when they call you out on some stuff. Now, granted, I am not saying it's okay to be hypocritical. What I am saying, we fail to realize that when we point out the inconsistency in others, we think that that gives us a pass to continue embracing our stuff that ain't right. So let's talk about God for a moment, because normally he never gets considered like he needs to. We never consider God's feelings first and foremost. What we do, we consider how we feel about it, being corrected or calling some things out that we have a heart issue about, and then we consider how other people feel about it who's doing the same thing that we also want to try to defend, whether it be our friends, family, relatives, or people who we admire, or we consider the people's feelings who make us feel bad and what people think about us. Rarely do we put God first, even though we say we do and we know we should. So let's talk about God feelings on the matter, because this should also make a little bit more sense. When it comes to God's judging of us, and this is why you also need to get my book, The New Age Vernacular, because the longest chapter is we're dispelling the notion that we are not supposed to judge. Not an opinion, biblical truth. You need to get that book. But let's just consider God for a moment when it comes to this flawed strategy of a double negative helps me embrace my negative a little more comfortably. Because all of us should be trying to please him. And if we're trying to please him, what sense does it make to look at God and say, God, you need to allow me to consistently do this wrong because I pointed out the same thing in the person who called out my wrong? That doesn't even sound like it makes sense, if you be honest. But this is the strategy that Fred Hammond used when he thought he killed it, bringing up the days of the week. And this is the same strategy that most of you have used in your life, and you probably still do it and don't even realize it. Again, I want to say this over and over again. Hopefully this gets embedded into your spirit and your mind to stop doing this because it's foolish. Think about when we bring up scriptures like, You need to, before you judge somebody else, you need to get the mote out of your eye before you deal with your brothers. Here's the thing that we don't do. We don't keep reading. Because it never says don't deal with your brother's mess at all. It says take a pause and deal with your mess, and then you can continue on dealing with your brother's mess. But good old America and American Christianity doesn't keep reading when it talks about that in the scriptures. And so, if we really be honest, just like Fred and others, we idolize our preferences and our choices and we call it God, when at the end of the day, we just simply want to do what we want to do and find reasons to reach, to cope, helping us feel comfortable doing some of the most foolish of and embracing some of the most silliest of anti-Christian things. So, again, that is not a good strategy. It doesn't prove any point. And if you're using it to help you feel good to continuing on or whatever it is you want to continue on in, I pray that the Holy Spirit convicts you, especially if you're a child of His or if you're going to be a child of His in the future. But I get it. Prideful people will be prideful and you can't tell them anything. And so people will continue on using this double negative strategy to, hey, let me be wrong because you're wrong. Doesn't make sense when you stand before God, because God is not going to accept the excuse of, Lord, I continue on embracing this foolishness because other people who warned me about my foolishness were doing the same things in other areas. Let's cut it out. And a lot of this stuff we would cease to doing anyway if we always use the filter of considering His heart and His mind on the matter over our own and over what we want to do. But as I've said many times before in some other teachings, one of the problems with American Christianity is we have been intoxicated by the freedom of choice. Because we get to choose any and everything in all the other areas in life, now we think we get to choose and tailor-make the Jesus that we want to wear and be comfortable with. One thing I know about a king, he doesn't operate that way. We don't get to tailor-make him. We're supposed to yield to him. This is what being living sacrifices is all about. So remember, a lot of things could be cleared up, even in our hearts and minds, if we use the filter of considering God's heart on the matter. Instead of being too busy saying, God told me this, God told me that. God didn't tell you that stuff. And here's one thing, all of these things, most of it could be measured by the scriptures. Because you know, God will never tell you something that contradicts His word or the character and the integrity of His word or the ways of faith. Though it makes you feel comfortable going on doing it. Remember, nothing gets by God. Even the stuff that you make yourself feel good and find reasons to continue doing it. Let's stop this flawed double negative crap today. And we'll all be better off. And if we understand it's not about us, but it's about those who are watching our lives, we will be better living epistles that are being read of men. Remember, make sure you be a part of remnant training coming up. Like this page, buy my book, visit my website. God bless.